Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People.
When you own a business, you should know how to treat all the people with respect.
But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go.
The ultimate retail revenge. I'm a 24-year-old girl working at a large home improvement retailer as a contractor sales associate. I'm lucky enough to have my parents pay for law school, and I work in retail to pay for other expenses. I'm well-trained, and customers enjoy seeing me at the desk since I'm easier to work with than some of the guys and their egos. I was working a busy Saturday in the summer, and customers tend to just leave carts with lumber and large merchandise laying around. I've made it a habit to leave sticky notes with times on the carts so I can keep track of how long they've been there so I can put the merchandise back. I had tagged a cart of lumber at the start of my shift. When I got back from lunch 3 hours later, the cart was still there with the original sticky tag and merchandise. Assuming it was abandoned, I put the merchandise back. An hour later, a customer approached me, ranting that someone put his cart back. I apologized profusely, explained that it had been left for so long that I thought it was abandoned. The response that followed was beyond rude. The customer proceeded to swear, degrade, and rant about how terrible I was. Rattled, I called my manager and asked him to come down. The customer proceeded to call me every rude name under the sun and left when some of the guys on the floor came over to see what was going on. I was in tears when my manager came over. I worked the next Sunday morning, and lo and behold, the same customer was my first of the day. I immediately called management, and they came over to cash him through while I got a look at his truck, which advertised a small window company. I told my parents immediately, and they assured me that it would be okay. My parents asked me when I was working next, and we didn't mention the incident for a week. A week and a half after the incident, I pulled into my driveway and was shocked to see that same van that my customer from hell drove. I walked inside the house and saw my parents sitting at the table with the customer from hell. He had brochures and a quote set up to replace the windows in our large old home. My mom called for me to come into the living room, and the man looked up at me, not recognizing me at first. My mom turns to the man and says in the sweetest voice, "This is my daughter, but I believe you've already met her." The customer looked confused and apologized for not recognizing me. My dad smiles at him and says, "She works at my store." The look on the man's face when he realized who I was cannot be described as anything less than perfect. My parents thanked him for coming and for the quote, but told him that they weren't going to go ahead with his company. He apologized profusely as he left my house, minus a huge sale. I think that he may have learned a valuable lesson about karma and treating other people, including retail workers, with respect. And our second story. Think you can steal my stuff and get away with it? Back in my first year of college, I lived in a residence hall on campus with 3 other dudes. 2 of them were cool, shout out to B-Dog and Al, but the third, named David, had a nasty habit of taking things that weren't his and mysteriously forgetting that the objects had fallen into his possession. Of the items he'd stolen and were subsequently found in his room included food and snacks, notebooks, vapes, earbuds, albeit cheap ones. We'd all complained to the RA, but since they were such small items, we were told we should just have a house meeting and talk about it with David to have the problem fixed. We had 2 of those where he claimed, "It all looks so similar. How am I supposed to know which is mine?" Considering that we all kept our stuff in our rooms, this was obviously BS, but the RA, resident assistant, said unless it was something major, campus police wouldn't launch an official investigation. So we instituted a masking tape policy and marked everything. But lo and behold, he still continued his petty theft. Knowing nothing would happen unless I took action, I planned my revenge. I shelled out around $80 for something similar to this bad boy. It was a USB device that, once plugged into an unsecured USB port, fried the computer by building a charge and dispersing it into the port, pretty much destroying the CPU, among other parts. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to plant this anywhere, but I had to make it seem like this was a tool and not some sort of setup. So I'd roped B-Dog and Al into my plan and installed this software called Device Lock, which protects USB ports from being used without express permission from the user on all of our devices, also in case the a-hole tried to plug it into our laptops. I even went as far as taping my name to this silicon time bomb. With them roped in, the last thing to do was wait to see if David had learned his lesson. It took all of 3 days. But expectedly, David did not learn his lesson. I was at the library when it happened, but David had decided that this sexy USB would be the perfect addition to his collection of stolen wares. So he went into my room and took it. Big mistake. I got a Snapchat from B-Dog that David was going postal and I needed to get back ASAP. I hightailed it, and when I got near our residence, I could physically hear David swearing and yelling from the hallway. When I got inside, he was cussing and screaming that he was going to sue me for purposely trying to damage his laptop by booby-trapping a USB. Admittedly, I should have held my composure better, but I laughed in that mofo's face. I told him that the USB was clearly labeled with my name on my desk in my room, and I was using it to test whether my computer ports were secured from devices such as this. Screaming ensued from him, after which our RA showed up, heard that crap fest from down the hall, and asked what the hell was happening. I stayed quiet and let David attempt to lie his way out of this, but holy F, the dumb crap kept to his story. After explaining my side, the RA said we're both going to campus police as this was pretty serious. Cue me thinking I just effed up my whole future for a stupid act of revenge. When we got there and explained our stories, campus police had none of David's crap. They told him that 1, he cannot sue me since this was not a trap but a security tool that was within my own living space, of which he had no right to enter to steal from, and 2, he was being relocated to the crappy single residences on the other side of campus. And if they caught wind of this again, he'd be banned for life from residence as well as receiving a non-academic offense, a nice little chat with the dean about his misconduct. His tone immediately flipped to crying and saying he had all his exam notes on there. It was stress that was causing him to do this. And he'd paid to live in a nicer dorm-style housing, but they basically told him, tough crap. This is your one and final warning. The 3 of us enjoyed the rest of the semester with an extra bedroom for storage space and beer pong, which was a definite win. As for David, I've only ever seen him in the cafeteria or library on occasion, sitting there studying without his laptop.
And our next story.
Make my partner work while contagiously sick? Enjoy having the health board checking up on you? This was about 10 years ago. At the time, I was with my ex-partner who worked at a petrol station chain in Australia. He came down sick with gastro, which is a highly infectious illness resulting in vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, etc. My ex notified his manager on Tuesday night that he wouldn't be able to make his shift the following morning as he was vomiting copiously still and assumed he would still be by then. His manager replied that he had to contact other workers to get his shift covered. Jerk move, but not illegal. My ex spends about an hour trying to get someone to cover for him, with no success. He lets his manager know, who responds with, "You'd better show up for your shift or you're fired. Doesn't matter if you're sick." His manager had a habit of doing this. He recently had made someone work while they had conjunctivitis, extremely contagious, and someone had to come in for their shift after they'd been in the hospital that day after having an asthma attack. The following day, my ex went to work. Note, this job also involved food handling, as they had a bread store in the petrol station. So people would come in to pay for their petrol and get a coffee and donut, pie, or cake. While handing a customer their cake, he pauses and vomits into a nearby hand-washing sink. During his shift, he continues to handle food and go to the toilet regularly because of the diarrhea. When my ex gets home, I ask if he'd been unwell, and he confirmed he continued to be sick while at work. I'm absolutely furious that he was threatened with job loss and most likely has spread his illness to a bunch of other people, so I call the health board of my state and report it. The board sends out someone on a surprise visit to the site, and it turns out there are lots of bad food handling and hygiene practices going on, not just the workers' illness issues. The company ends up being fined $150,000 and had to make significant changes to how some things were run. As for the manager, turns out the whole show up even if you're sick or you're fired policy wasn't exactly the company line, and he got his butt handed to him over it.
And our next story. Never seen anything like it. I stopped off at a service station because I felt quite nauseous. I felt the need to be sick, rushed into the toilet. Karen bangs loudly on the door and shouts, "Are you effing drunk?" I go to wash my hands and she's screaming in my face that I'm drunk and shouldn't be driving. She runs out to get the manager and Karen then phones the police. I kid you not. I try and explain that I think I have a bug and I'm on my way home from work, but she's having absolutely none of it. I walk to my car and she's screaming and lies down in front of my car. The police show up, and I really want to go home at this point as I've already had a long day and feeling sick. So I agree to do a breathalyzer. Obviously, it comes back that I don't have a trace of alcohol in my system. Free to go, Karen again is having none of this and doesn't believe the police. Starts having a go at the police and the manager now. Long story short, she gets arrested, and I gotta go home to my nice, cozy bed. She was totally unhinged. Edit. I got into my car because I wanted to lock the door away from this woman. I didn't drive while she was laying there, boxed in my car too. I waited for the police to arrive. And our second story.
And our last story for dessert. Charge rent for literally every little thing? Good luck trying to rent your house to someone again. When my coworker was a child, they used to have a neighbor. And said neighbor's landlord was a complete D-bag. She would charge rent for anything and everything which is in her house, and look for who knows how many excuses just to be able to charge more rent. She even charged more rent just because their neighbor would use the fireplace. So one day the neighbor moved out, but not without leaving a little gift. The neighbor went to a fish market, got an eel, and hid it in the fireplace. What led my coworker to tell me this story was that his mother, who still lives there, called him yesterday. She told him that ever since the neighbor moved out, the house wasn't rented to anybody else ever again, and the landlord still didn't figure out that the neighbor had put an eel in the fireplace. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one, with more great stories and crazy people in it.